All right, hey guys. We're here to talk to you about what it's actually like to be a software engineer at Google. I'm Harrison. I'm from New Zealand, and I studied at the University of Canterbury in Christchurch. In 2020, I moved to Wellington to work for Xero, and in 2022, I moved to Sydney to work for Google.
Hey everyone, I'm Ian. I'm in my third year at Google as a software engineer. I moved to Sydney in 2019 and I studied computer science at UNSW.
We work on something you've all probably heard of, Google Maps. Specifically, we work on Google Maps in the car. So there's two main ways that you can use Google Maps in the car. The first is with your phone, and you can plug it in and it projects to the screen, so your phone controls the screen. And the second is what you see here, where there's an actual screen in the car that has maps running on it. So it's the car's computer, pretty much. And when I was in uni, or before I started as a software engineer, I wasn't really sure what software engineers actually did. I just assumed that they wrote code all day. That's not really all that it involves. And if we wanted to talk through that today, it would probably take a little bit too long. But we are going to try to give you somewhat of an idea of what our job is actually like.
So you probably all heard the term that engineers solve problems. But what does that really mean, and what problems are worth solving? All right, so let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture first. As screens get bigger and bigger in cars, we found that we were having a harder and harder time reaching our map buttons. This is because we always place them on the far side of the screen from drivers. So in Australia, where drivers drive on the right-hand side of the road, the far side of the screen would be on the left-hand side. So if a driver wanted to mute voice guidance, for example, they would have to tap on the screen, reach over to the far side, and then press the mute button. This is a poor experience for our users and a potentially distracting and dangerous one. So we needed to find a solution. Our solution was to move these buttons to the driver's side of the screen. We did this so that buttons were easily accessible for all drivers, and we also chose to show the buttons at all times so that drivers had to do less work to interact with them.
Sounds pretty simple, right? Sadly, not so much. It sounds like we just have to move something to another side of the screen. And maybe it takes a couple of hours and we can call it a day. Unfortunately, not that easy. There's a bunch of different steps that we have to take to get to that solution, and a bunch of different steps we have to take before our idea can reach our users. So first, we need to gather requirements and design what it's going to look like. Then we can begin to code. After that, we have to perform testing to make sure what we wrote actually works. Then we can start to release our feature to users. And finally, we can monitor to make sure we didn't make any mistakes. Sometimes things don't really go as planned. Maybe our requirements change and we have to go back and write some more code and do all our testing again. Maybe our testing fails and we have to go back and rewrite our code again. Or maybe during monitoring, we find that we caused an issue and we have to go back and write it all again. Maybe not it all again, but we have to rewrite our code. So as you can see, our work can be pretty repetitive and, more importantly, iterative. Coding is only a small part of it, and we often repeat the same thing over and over again to achieve the result we want. So let's take you through each of these steps, and we'll try to explain what each one involves.
So the first step is gathering requirements and creating designs. So before we start any work, we need to decide how our new changes should function for our users and what they should actually look like. We worked with product managers to decide how our things should function, and we work with designers who decide how things should look. This is often a collaborative process which involves some back and forth between all parties, and as engineers, we're not being just told what to build and what to do. All right, so let's go write some code. So once we've decided what we're going to do and what it should look like, it's now our job as software engineers to make it a reality. We spend days, weeks, or even months just writing code to move all those buttons to the driver's side and to make them show at all times. As we said before, this sounds simple, but building apps is much more complicated than we actually have time to dive into right now, so kind of just trust us. There's a reason why this can take months. While we're writing our code, we might run into things that weren't considered during the design and decision-making phases. For example, What should we do on very small screens where these buttons take up a large amount of space? I mean, it'd be pretty annoying, right, if such large buttons were part of your screen. So to answer these questions, we talked to the designers and product managers again to see if we need to change our plan. And if we do, we need to go back to our code and change what we've written.
Next up, we have testing. Testing is an integral part of the software engineering process. We need to make sure what we've written actually works. We do this both by writing automated tests, that is code that tests our code. And we also test by manually testing with the app. In our case, we have a bunch of test cars in the Google Sydney office that we get to use. This is normally done by our software engineers or partially done by our software engineers, but we also have dedicated testers whose job it is to test for us and try to find our mistakes. We also test by letting other Googlers use maps before it's released to our users. Effectively, they're our beta testers. If we find issues during testing, we're going to have to go back, write some more code, potentially talk with our designers and product managers, and then test it all again. As we said before, it's an iterative process that sometimes repeats many times.
So let's say we finish writing all our code and we think everything is tested properly. Next, we'd release our new changes to users, like you guys. However, we do this slowly and we don't release to everyone everywhere all at once, so we can compare experiences between two groups. For example, we might give our new changes to this half of the room and then compare your experiences with the other half of the room who didn't get the changes. And then we'd know if there are any issues between those two groups. So in this particular case, there actually was an issue. Phones of users with the new changes were experiencing overheating when using maps in the car. And this is one of the issues we were keeping an eye out for. This means we have to investigate the problem and figure out why we're overheating our users' phones. We found that one button in particular was causing the overheating, the compass button. So after some investigation, we found that we reanimate the compass button every single time the phone changes direction. In some cases, this was happening over 100 times a second. And even if us humans can't perceive that movement, the slightest vibration or bump can cause the phone to shift and move, and our compass button was super sensitive to that movement. As you can see, this wasn't a problem previously, since we often didn't show the compass button on the screen and users had to make it appear manually. However, now that we're showing the compass button at all times, we're making the phone perform far more calculations and work than necessary, causing the phone to overheat. So to solve this, we changed how sensitive that compass button was to the phone's movement so that a larger movement was necessary before we reanimated the compass button, and this successfully stopped the overheating problem that we introduced.
So as well as our internal tools that we use to see if we've introduced any problems, like Ian talked about, we also take a look at public user feedback to see what people are saying about our change. And people say things like, this permanent sidebar thing has to go, and that it's an eyesore, that it's uselessly wasting screen space, or that we're even led by sadists. It's not all bad. Some people find it useful. Some people think it's an improvement. But one thing we learned very quickly is that it's the people who feel most strongly who are most outspoken. And generally, people are going to feel most strongly about something negative. When it breaks, they don't like it. They're going to tell you. So that's why the majority of feedback we get is negative, and also why we need to have robust internal metrics, like being able to tell if a phone's overheating, to see if what we make has positive impact or not.
So today we've tried to give you a little inkling of what it's like to be a software engineer at Google. We've gone through the iterative process that we use, how it's often not so straightforward, and we've also shown you some of the problems that we have to solve every single day. So thank you all for listening, and we'd now like to open up the floor to any questions. Yeah, so we'll just repeat that question. So with the pressure to develop a product with such impact, do we feel like there's a lot of pressure for us to deliver? Every year we have a set of expectations that we kind of set out for ourselves and we aim to complete. I think pressure is just part of any job, really.
Yeah, I don't think Google really applies that pressure. I think it kind of depends on your team and depends on the culture of the team. Google's pretty big, so there's a large variance. But yeah, I think on a whole, Google does a pretty good job of not applying that kind of pressure. I think at the front here.
How long have you guys been working as software engineers for? And how often do you guys get problems, or is it just when an update comes out?
I've been working as a software engineer for, this is my 5th year.
It's my 3rd year at Google, but I spent like a year or 2 in uni, like doing some internships as a software engineer. The second part of that question was, how often do we run into problems like this?
All the time.
Pretty often, like.
The stuff we work on is quite complex, even if the user-facing stuff doesn't seem that complex. So it's really easy to make a mistake. It's kind of expected. That's why we have dedicated testers. That's why we have the ways to tell, if a phone's overheating. It's expected, and we pretty much do it constantly.
Yeah.
It's very rarely that we would release a feature and we don't have bugs.
Yeah, we try to keep it under the wraps as much as possible, so you guys don't have to.
Hopefully they're not major bugs, but
yeah. Maybe one at the very far back, like that. Yeah, you, the one that just stood up a little bit. Yep.
How did you guys get accepted to work at Google?
Pure skill and talent. Nah. So I was part of kind of like a graduate program. So in my final year of university, I just applied on the careers page and then had to do my interviews from there. I think.
Yeah, I also just went through the standard interview process because I'd already been in the industry for 2 years. It ends up being about 4 interviews, 3 technical ones and 1 behavioral, effectively. Yeah.
We also have an internship program. So if you're in like 2nd or 3rd year university, you can apply for an internship, and then as an intern, you can also convert to a full-time role.
How many people worked on this problem?
This specific problem, I'd say the system health team helped us a lot. So I had about 4 engineers on that team help my team in particular solve that problem. So,
but they're not helping full time. They'll have other stuff to do as well. But you end up collaborating quite a lot with a reasonably large amount of people for a reasonably small change.
So is it common to restart the entire coding process because 1 or 2 mistakes? It can happen. We try to design and plan so that our code, the software engineering design, is kind of thought out a couple months ahead of time before it begins. So we try to avoid that. But things can happen that you don't foresee.
It's pretty rare. Realistically, we say iterative because we're going to go back and change part of what we've written. It's very rare to rewrite the whole thing. You'd have to really screw up.
What do you think is the most integral aspect of the problem-solving process?
What is the most integral aspect of the problem-solving process? I think it's being able to just learn new things just very quickly and being able to understand ambiguous aspects and kind of specifications that are given to you, and being able to call out, ask questions to make it clear what problem you really are trying to solve. Because sometimes you get communicated this is what we want to do, and then sometimes as an engineer you can also kind of push back and say, hey, is that really useful for users in a certain way? You can kind of prod the designers and the product managers' mind to make them rethink the problem scope a little bit more.
At the back, red, or in the middle maybe, rather. Yep.
I'm not sure if you're you know this, but I heard that you can sell products through Google. Do you know how that works?
As far as I don't. As far as I know, we don't sell any products apart from our own ads. The guy in the red, if you want to yell out, I'll repeat your question. How would we describe the company culture at Google?
I'd say it's pretty fun. It's pretty relaxed, kind of you can manage your own time when you want to manage your own time and work on the things you want to work on. It's kind of very similar to, I guess, uni, where you have a project and some time to do it. How you do it and how you finish it and how you deliver is completely up to you. So in the meantime, if you do manage your time well, you can kind of enjoy the amenities, kind of free food. We have gyms, massages, so it's a pretty good culture. No, this was the first project I ever worked on in my career at Google. Whether it's the hardest, I wouldn't say so. I think every year or every half, like a new project comes along, and there's obviously new challenges that come with that, and it's very hard to compare like which is harder than the other. But there are some that are definitely larger in scope that take more time, more months in planning and coding. That
Yeah, it's quite hard to quantify like what's hard, because I mean I would actually say most of the difficulty or frustration that I deal with is with communication. Like if I'm just coding, it's great. Like I can just do it. Like, but as soon as I have to go talk to teams in the US, or get someone to go do some work for me, something like that I can't do, that's when it becomes difficult. And you're trying to manage people and manage other people's wants and needs as well as your own.
What's my opinion on AI? I think it's pretty revolutionary. I think the world has changed so much because of AI and how much we rely on it. And I'm not sure of what presentations you guys have seen today, but AI is just pretty much in every part of our lives already. Like things like your Spotify recommendations, that's all AI already. Summaries in AI, there's a lot of applications.
Do we use AI in coding, and how much do we earn? Google has a bunch of internal tools that use our internal AI that does like code complete and stuff like that. So personally, I don't actually use them very often. I know there's a lot of developers at Google who do. On the earning question,
I earn under $1 billion. It's not enough.
Sure. How long have we been boys for?
How long me and Harrison been gangsters like this? Yeah, we met each other like when I joined, it was like 2023. It was a couple years older than me and my team, but we've been friends for a good time. We've been to like ski trips with each other, that kind of stuff.
I think we got told no more questions. Sorry, team.
We're happy to take more questions outside, but yeah, thank you everyone for listening.